Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody's doing okay today in their shelter in place. I saw Florida just something announced about 10 seconds ago that they're doing something differently. So things are changing as we speak on minute by minute. But I think one thing that never changes is everybody's need and interest in trying to find new ways to generate revenue, especially leveraging the customer base that they already have. So we've got something really exciting today. I think you're guys going to be kind of blown away by it. So I wanted to introduce Luke Glass. He's the CEO and founder of RealX. You may know him from his days as a long-term industry veteran. He was one of the people that really took ListHub, for many of you that might know that product, and figured out a way to help all of us get, nationwide and even global listing exposure and lead gen opportunities through that. And he's doing it again. He's taken all of his experience from ListHub and of course working for Realtor.com, one of the absolutely the most engaging real estate website in the country today, and he's bringing it into a whole new revenue opportunity. He's going to teach us how we can actually tap into land use and leasing of land use. And what's really neat about this, he's going to tell you all about it, is that the people that we can work with are probably people that are already in your sphere, people that you already have relationships with. And the great news is we don't have to become experts in a whole new type of real estate. He's going to do all the work for us, right, Luke? Pretty much.
That's absolutely right.
And here's the good thing, just in the crazy world that we're living in right now, what he's going to show us are ways that you never have to, get inside of a property. You never have to go visually meet with people. You don't ever have to do an open house. You don't have to do any of the things that, frankly, many of us can't do right now anyway. So with that, I wanted to introduce Luke and have him take us through this exciting thing. If we can just flip to the next slide, though, just a little bit of logistics. I'm sure that some of you guys may have questions for Luke. If you look over on the right-hand side in the Go to Webinar control panel, there's a little box that says questions, and there's a little gray triangle next to it. If you just click on that gray triangle, it will open up that box, and then feel free to ask a question. We may, if you can do it throughout the broadcast. If there's any time that you have a question, just put it in there. We may answer it right at that time, or if not, hold on till the end, and we'll be addressing a lot of questions then as well. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Luke and tell us about this whole new industry called, sort of land use rights. What is it, and why should we be excited about it?
Well, thank you, Marilyn, and hello, everyone at home. I try to boil it down to the simplest possible explanation, which is RealX is an exchange to buy, sell, and lease property rights. RealX is an exchange to buy, sell, and lease property rights. And as you can tell by our logo on the screen, those property rights really vary from all the way in the air to subsurface rights as well. An exchange has buyers and sellers. And on the sell side, we want to talk about today, our goal is to help you create an entirely new business line representing landowners as the sellers in the exchange. So first and foremost, though, I really want to define what these property rights are. We do not buy and sell land. We do not buy and sell homes on that land. Everything in RealX is about using the land for various purposes. And property rights are broken down into three different categories. The first is surface rights. You can lease those surface rights for solar farms, wind farms, timber, cell towers, billboards, hunting and fishing licenses, transmission lines, and many more. There are also subsurface rights, and subsurface rights include oil and gas, sand, gravel, other aggregates and minerals, and subsurface water as well. So those can either be leased or sold when you're talking about subsurface rights. And then the third category of property rights is air rights. Those are typically only common in urban areas around airports. But as drones continue to fly, there is one company out there leasing air rights, creating highways in the sky, but not really that popular yet today, but could be coming. So the property rights, again, are broken into surface, subsurface, and air rights when you think about it. And so the market for these rights is actually huge. $50 billion of property rights acquisition. I forgot to mention we are across from the fire station, and that is the local fire department will now be running to the fire station. and it blasts 4 times. So there you go. We're done.
All right, perfect. They're saving somebody. That's a good thing.
It happens once a week, and I knew it was going to happen in this hour. I just knew it. So property rights acquisitions across the United States annually is $50 billion. That is money that's actually paid to landowners to lease their rights for specific purposes. Again, oil and gas, solar, timber, wind, cell phone towers, etc. And then there's another $50 billion of royalties and rent paid. So once you have a producing well on your property or a solar farm on your property or a cell tower, you're getting a check every month. And that is a $50 billion plus kind of cash flow that gets paid out annually to those landowners. And that is also highly transactable. So we'll talk a little bit about not only can you lease your land for specific purposes, but if you have an existing royalty stream, you can list that on the exchange as well and sell that today. And so with $100 billion changing hands each year, a 4% commission creates a $4 billion gross commission income addressable market. So it's a really big market, and I'll break some of this down for you later to make it more individualized. But it's a big market that's got a lot of problems in it. So the core problem for landowners, they just don't know where to market their property rights for their land. How do I get a solar field on my farm? How do I get a cell phone tower? Who would I market that to, and who would I call? They don't know what all opportunities are available for them to generate revenue. They want to make sure that their land is seen by the broadest amount of buyers. Landowners will get postcards, they'll get cold calls, they'll get knocks on their door asking them to lease their rights from various companies. But that doesn't ensure that it's getting seen by every potential buyer in the market. They need help negotiating the deal. Most landowners are largely underserved in this part of the world. And then the other part is that how do they know these buyers are reputable and legitimate? There are flippers and scammers out there who lease these rights for $300 an acre and turn around and sell them for $1,000 an acre. And so there is a real kind of trust issue for landowners out there across some of these verticals and finding out who to trust. And then I mentioned they want to know, can I sell my royalty stream for cash today? And on the other side of the exchange, when we think about the companies that actually buy or lease this land, their problem is much more acute. They want to have the easiest way to find the land they want access to. In fact, early in my diligence, I talked to one of the largest solar developers in the country. And I said, if you're going to do a new solar development outside of Philadelphia, where do you start? And they started by saying, first we send out postcards. Then we cold call. Then we hire people on the ground to go knock on doors and ask people if they're interested in solar. So as an entrepreneur, you initially say, well, that cannot be the best way to find the available land you need in order to do your solar development. So it's very manual. It's very people driven. When they're trying to get in new areas, they have to have feet on the ground in those areas. And the transactional processes are highly paper driven. So both sellers and the landowners have a host of problems and solutions, and the buyers had a host of problems that they were dealing with as well. And so RealX is the first and largest aggregated exchange in the United States to transact these property rights. Now landowners have one place to go to register all of their property rights, and buyers have one place to go to see all the available inventory in that marketplace. So in my example earlier, that solar development company, before spending the money on postcards and cold calling and knocking on doors, they simply would log into RealX, see what available acres exist around the Philadelphia market, and be connected to those landowners in under 5 minutes. And the key part for you as the real estate professionals is we want to make sure you're representing that individual landowner exchange. And in fact, individual land. Oh, yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question about that? It almost sounds like you're kind of creating an MLS for these kind of land use rights in effect, right? It's the same thing where everything comes together. Buyers can see what's going on, sellers can see what's going on, and you're creating a marketplace that's something that we've never seen for this part of real estate before. It's really exciting.
Exactly right. So, this has happened in commercial real estate and residential real estate, in vacation rentals. There's these aggregated exchanges where the sellers and the buyers can be connected. Even neighborhood content is being aggregated together. And so what we want to do, there is no one place that aggregates this property rights, and that gives you the ability to transact in one place. So it is a way for all agents to get their landowners' data in one spot, and now buyers have one place to go in order to see everything that's available for sale. So it ends up becoming, the website, the aggregated website for all available property rights. So it is a good analogy, Marilyn. And so this is what the exchange looks like today. You now have a complete system to market your clients' properties to buyers across verticals. So when you talk with your individual landowners, and we typically say target landowners with 10 acres or more, because those are the ones that actually can generate the most revenue. We do have properties in our system that are, 1 or 2 acres for different purposes, whether it be cellular or some oil and gas things. But when you get that small, the money becomes relatively small. So we target 10 acres or more. And the only way for individual landowners to register their land is through a licensed real estate professional. We believe your role is critical in representing them. We took an investment from the National Association of Realtors. We just announced last week that Second Century Ventures, the venture capital arm of the NAR, invested in RealX. They see the value of a new asset class for realtors to transact and the ability to really bring order and transparency to a marketplace that's been highly fragmented and people-driven for a long time. You register property rights in RealX just like you register a house with a listing agreement. You sign a registration agreement with the landowner that says what rights they're willing to sell or lease in the system. There's an agreed upon commission rate in that agreement, and then you enter that data into RealX. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that data is in a second. But at that point, with this, you're really only collecting the seller's intent or the landowner's intent, whether or not they're willing to do solar or wind or oil and gas or transmission lines. We take care of a lot of the nitty-gritty content collection and data. And the good news is there's no showings, there's no signs, there's no photography, there's no lockboxes. Once you register the data, buyers have instant access to that data in our system. We have over 6 million acres registered in the RealX exchange today. We have active buyers making offers every day. And in fact, during this kind of slowdown when all of our buyers have are working from home, our activities went up 4x in the last 2 weeks. So there are more and more companies using this time to find available acreage, ask questions, and start making offers. I wanted to talk real quickly, though, about the differentiators of RealX in comparison to other things that do exist out there. First is that our exchange lists all of your property rights. All of those surface rights that I mentioned around solar, wind, timber, hunting and fishing licenses, pipelines, subsurface rights. Now they don't have to talk to multiple people, right, to talk about timber and talk to a different person about solar and talk to a different person about oil and gas. They now have one exchange through their real estate professional where they can list all of their property rights. We make sure their land is marketed across all industries on their behalf. So some landowners might say, hey, I'm willing to register all my property rights. And some may say, hey, I'm really only willing to do solar. I'm only willing to do timber on my property. But we make sure that your land receives the broadest exposure to all the buyers in that vertical and make sure that you're getting the best offer. I think that's a key distinction too. This is not an auction site. So we are not putting the properties up and saying this property is for auction. We're letting demand and supply meet each other. So our buyers go in, research the properties, and then make offers directly to the landowners. The other thing it is not is we don't put a price on it. There is no pricing discussion between you and your landowner. You're not trying to guess what the value is of any of these property rights. We register all the details about that particular property, and then offers come in on that. So it's different than an auction, and it's not priced like residential real estate. Trust is a real big component of the system. Landowners are now represented by their trusted real estate agent. There's been a lot of erosion of that trust across some of the verticals out there where landowners just don't know who to trust on whether or not they're getting a good deal and who the buyers are. And that's why the real estate professional is so critical to the process. All buyers are verified by RealX. If you go to RealX today as an individual, you can't see all the properties available for sale. It's behind a login, and we do that purposely. We want to make sure that we've vetted every buyer that's come into the exchange, that they're a legitimate company, that they have a buying history, that they're in the vertical, and we have a document each one of them must fill out. that tells us what they do, how long they've been doing it, because we want those buyers to be verified and that the closing rate be extremely high in the system after offers are made. And then finally, we have a network of professionals to help you and your landowner, whether it be natural resource lawyers to help you negotiate the deal, or very specific questions about solar, like who cuts the grass, who takes the solar panels down after 20 years, all those types of questions that we don't expect you as individual real estate agents to know. We provide a network of professionals that can answer all those questions for you at data collection or once an offer comes in on the process.
Luke, we just got an interesting question for you. Came in from Daniel. Is there, so let's say that I've got a property and I want to sell it for, I don't know, whatever it is, solar or something, wind, things that require zoning. Is there any vetting on the zoning capabilities before a property gets listed to do that, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So in oil and gas, as an example, there's an upfront bonus payment, and they've already done all the work beforehand before they make you an offer, whether or not the zoning and permitting allows them to do what they want to do on that property. So in oil and gas, it's usually an upfront payment, and they've already vetted all of that. In solar and wind, it works the exact opposite. They'll make you an offer upfront for a small amount of money, and then there's like 12 to 18 months, even 24 months of work sometimes, of zoning, permitting, working with the utilities. So some of the solar deals take longer to get through the pipeline because there is a much longer diligence period. The diligence period, like on an oil and gas deal, is less 30 days. And the diligence period from the first offer until the operation actually gets started is longer in solar and wind, as an example.
Timber, if I understand right, the buyer is doing that vetting, not the real estate agent has nothing to do with that. It's the person that's buying it.
Correct.
They don't have to worry about it.
That's right. In solar is the perfect example. You would sign a lease, and that lease would say the buyer has up to X amount of time, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, to get all of the permitting, zoning, intersection agreements, work with the utilities, make sure there's capacity on the lines. There's a lot of work to do, but that's all on the buyer to do during that time period. And so in that example, sometimes they get 2 years in, and they come to find out that there is no capacity on the line, and that homeowner just gets their minimum payment for the year and a half, and then they would terminate the lease. But yeah, so in solar there is a little bit longer vetting period, but that's all on the buyer. Another key reason that we want real estate agents involved is, look, all of the people in your communities. You've spent a significant amount of time and effort building up your trust in those communities. These landowners and the ones that have this acreage. And landowners, for the most part, have been underserved in this market. And this is a real way for you to add to your lines of business and work with your existing sphere, as Marilyn said at the beginning. This is a way for you to tap into everything you've done in your career in real estate and really find those landowners that have this significant amount of acreage and give them a new value proposition. There's a new reason to reach out to them, a new reason to engage. And the primary targets for this are existing landowners. So those people in your sphere that are currently living on the property or don't live on the property but have owned it for a while. When a new buyer comes in and you see a transaction with significant acreage, probably a good time to reach out to that buyer and talk to them about potentially monetizing their property rights. And then with sellers, sometimes you can sever the subsurface rights and list those in RealX, and then sell the surface with the home and the land in the MLS, just like you always would. So there's a few options with sellers and buyers, but primarily you're targeting landowners that have significant acreage at the moment. Any other questions, Marilyn, before I go?
Yeah, actually, we're getting lots of them. First one is from Kathy. Who's responsible for environmental studies? Does that fall in the same camp of getting the permits and stuff?
Yeah, so that is on the buyer side. And so the buyer has to do an environmental impact study in order to get certain permitting done. We actually are working creating a network of companies for our buyers that they can tap into to get those done in a more automated fashion. But ultimately, that onus is on the buyer to do those environmental impact studies. And the cost is on their side as well.
That's great. So there's another question. I have listed assemblages that the developers are passing up. I don't know what an assemblage is. Hopefully you do, but would those be of interest to RealX?
Assemblage is a new word for me.
Okay.
But I think when we talk about developers, I will say this: in a lot of your housing developments, the developer kept the subsurface rights for a lot of those developments. So if there's
Okay.
a 500 acre tract and there's 500 1 acre lots in there, a lot of times the developer will have severed the subsurface rights. And with horizontal drilling today, as an example, no well or no drill head needs to be on that acreage. They can put the drill 2 miles away and just drill under that development
Oh.
if they need to. So if we're talking about developers in that sense, there are also big commercial real estate developers that also control larger tracts of land. So it's a real primary target for real estate agents and brokers to target these developers, because a lot of times they do have these rights and they don't know what to do with them either. They just know they still
Oh,
have them.
interesting.
Yeah.
Georgia had a couple of questions for you, actually. The first one is, how is financing of these rights normally obtained? And secondly, who's that cool company that's creating highways in the sky? That's kind of a fun question.
All right, so I answer them in reverse.
Okay.
Skyrights.io, I believe, is the URL. Skyrights.io.
Okay.
He is. I don't know if he's actually bought any yet, but that's his plan. He's raising money to buy sky rights in the air right field.
Wow.
And then the other question. Sorry, I went backwards and then I forgot.
How is financing of these rights
Financing.
normally obtained? Yeah.
Yeah, in almost all cases, there is no financing on the buy side. Every deal we've seen in oil and gas, solar, timber, there is no mortgage, there is no financing company. Every one of our buyers is a company, right? So the biggest companies would be Chevron and Shell. And then the smallest companies would be smaller solar developers who are, smaller companies, but they still all have raised money and the financing comes directly. It's basically cash. There is no financing involved on the buy side for the most part.
Got it. Oh, and Sharon explained to us what an assemblage is. Thank you, Sharon, for giving us a new word. It's sellers of 5 acres each property assembled together. So it's like a collection of properties, it sounds like.
Yeah, and so this is popular in lots of rural areas where landowners will get together and say, hey, each one of our individual 5 acres, like no timber company is going to come timber 5 acres. But if you have 20 landowners that each have 5 acres that are contiguous or at least in the same area, now you have 100 acres, and absolutely the timber companies will come and do that, right? Same with oil and gas, and same with solar, right? If you have a couple tracts, and so if you can concentrate your land tracts together or have these assemblages, I'm glad I learned a new word today. Lots of times agents will invite entire communities to a meeting, right? And say, hey, I want to invite all of you to come, and I'm going to say, hey, if we're all in this together, we all have a better shot of getting offers because we have more acreage in the system and we'll attract bigger buyers than if it's individual, 10 acres here, 10 acres there. So
would you list it as an assemblage in that case? I mean, I know you don't know that word, so it's probably not a field in your system, but would you list it as the 100 acres or would you list it as the 5 or both?
We would list it as both, I think. And so we do this today with some of our bigger institutional landowners. They'll tell us, hey, look, I'm only willing to do this if they do the deal for all the property, right? I don't want to do it on a onesie, twosie basis. So we do have the ability to create what we call packages in the system. So if you click on a parcel in the system, it'll actually highlight all 10 parcels and say, hey, this is a bulk offer. If you're going to make an offer, you're making an offer on all of this. Yeah, so we can do that as well.
Okay, well, let's have, obviously people are excited about this. Why don't we let you keep going a little bit and then we'll come back to some more of the questions. So keep them coming, guys. We'll get back to it in a minute, but why don't you tell us the rest of the story and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a few of the buyers in the market that I think are the most active right now and what we expect over the next 3, 5, and 10 years. So solar, look, we think solar is going to grow by 10x over the next decade. 3-4% of our power today comes from solar. That's going to be 30 or 40% of our energy is going to come from solar. The fastest growing segment of solar is community solar. So these are these 20, 30, 40 acre parcels. It's not the, multi-thousand acre parcels that you think of in New Mexico. Most of the growth is going to come in community solar over those years. In fact, we're doing a community solar deal right now in New York. You don't think of New York as a traditionally sunny place, but through tax incentives and tax credits, it is economical, and they are leasing, 20, 30, 40, 50 acre parcels for that. So it's going to grow. Policy will drive adoption. So as your state and local governments pass laws that require a certain amount of energy coming from renewables, that's when you'll see a frenzy of activity in your market. It's why it's important to have your landowners registered early, because a lot of times those solar developers will come in and in a really condensed time frame try to lease up as many acres as they can if they believe the state of Iowa is going to pass a law imminently. It's happening in Pennsylvania right now. They're working on passing the laws around it, and there's a lot of leasing activity going on at the moment. Wind is actually a bigger percentage of our energy today than solar, in the 5, 6, 7% range, but it's not growing nearly as fast. The economics are a little tougher in wind, plus you have great big windmills that no one likes to see, and it's really limited to places where you have wind, which is kind of more primarily in the Midwest, whereas solar, as we've seen now, can be anywhere. I mean, if you can do solar in Philadelphia and New York, you can do solar anywhere. So we don't see as much growth in wind, and wind also needs bigger tracts of land. So if you do have landowners that have hundreds or thousands of acres that's contiguous, then there are some opportunities if you're in the right part of the country. Oil and gas is probably the largest and well-established, most liquid of the buyer community. They spend nearly $25 to $30 billion a year leasing and buying property rights. And even as renewables increase, I spent some time at Carnegie Mellon with their energy team talking about what does it look like in 2050. And they believe 50% of our energy will come from renewables and 50% of our energy will come from natural gas. Primarily because natural gas can now be burned at power plants with zero carbon emissions. So there will be an ongoing need for natural gas to be a key energy source for us over that time period. And there's a lot of options for flexibility in oil and gas as well. If you have open acreage, you can lease it. If you've already leased your acreage, and so I talk with some real estate agents who go, oh, my whole area is already leased. Well, you can still sell your mineral rights with that lease. It's just like selling a building with tenants in it. Even if you have a producing well on your property, you can sell your mineral rights with the lease, with the producing well. In fact, it's the #1 asset people are looking for today. They're willing to make offers on producing wells to get that royalty stream over the next couple of decades. And this is probably the vertical where trust has been eroded the most, where landowners, I think, kind of feel like they need someone on their side fighting for them in this arena. Timber has been interesting. I've learned more about timber in the last 18 months than I thought I ever would. We originally went into the timber space thinking it was all about stumpage sales and that, you know, you're going to get offers from timber companies to cut down your trees. But what we're finding is that there's a real growing market for conservation easements as carbon offsets. And so we're actually seeing companies that want to lease land in order to keep the trees and plant more trees. So they create these conservation credits that are available for companies to purchase as a carbon offset. And so we work with some key partners. So we like to say sometimes money actually does grow on trees. So you can get paid to have your trees cut down, and you can also get paid to keep your trees and agree that you won't cut them down. And in our system, as you're talking with your landowners, there's simply a question about whether or not they'd be willing to sign a conservation easement to protect the trees that they have on their current property. Maryland, I think there's a 65,000 acre swamp in Florida for sale if you want to, and you're just buying the right to keep it a swamp at the moment. Cell towers is a really interesting space. Most of the activity today is for your landowners who already have a cell phone tower. The cell phone tower leases started getting signed about 30 years ago. So the first leases are coming up for renewal because most of them were 30-year terms. And so if you have an existing cell phone tower on your property, you have a lot of opportunities to monetize that. You can sell perpetual easements underneath it. You can renegotiate with the carriers. There are a lot of offers out there. If you have an existing cell phone tower on a property, I can almost guarantee you'll have 5 offers in the first week of ways to try to monetize that cell phone tower in a better way for the landowner. In terms of new towers, there's still 4,000 or 5,000 new towers that are going to grow up across the country every year. If you have land that's at elevation, if your landowners have places that are higher in your markets, then they're going to be more apt to get those offers. And then with 5G, most 5G growth is going to come from commercial buildings. So if you have commercial buildings and owners you know that have commercial buildings, we also list those commercial buildings because they get offers for rooftop antennas to make 5G more widespread across the country. Agriculture is another one. So, an interesting example is that, if you're planting corn, the yield is about $1,000 an acre for corn, and the yield for hemp is $40,000 an acre. So as you can imagine, in certain parts of the country, farmers are leasing their land to hemp farmers, and they end up making more money than they would if they were actually working the land themselves, growing corn. So agriculture is another one where, as you talk with your landowners, would they be willing to lease their land for agriculture? I've talked about the revenue streams a couple of times. Look, all that happens here is that the financial buyers put a discount rate on that revenue stream and then make an offer directly to landowners. So any landowners that want to monetize that today for various reasons, they can list those revenue streams in the system today, and there are a lot of financial buyers. There are other property rights, not as much money involved, but you have pipelines and transmission lines, hunting and fishing licenses. In fact, there are 7,000 acres in New York and Pennsylvania right now with hunting and fishing licenses that they're willing to sell, if anyone's interested. But we continue to kind of evaluate all the different property rights that are available in the marketplace, and we have what we think is an exhaustive list of those that the homeowner can choose to do or not. This is a view of the country. I think most of you kind of know where you're sitting and can probably pick out the property rights that are the most applicable to the market you're in. But solar and cellular is everywhere. They cover the bulk of the country. Oil and gas and timber are primarily the green dots. So you see the forested areas. Green represents forest in the United States. And so the oil and gas kind of goes down the middle of the country and then up through Appalachia. But there are other pockets of it around as well. Wind is primarily the yellow area. So when you think about the pasture and range, the yellow dots on the map are primarily for wind. And then agricultural leasing is primarily in the brown, but also some in Appalachia as well. So without talking about each state specifically, I think you'll have a pretty good sense for what property rights are probably the most active in your market as we kind of go across the country. We spent a lot of time talking to landowners, and I think it's interesting that they're almost direct analogies to everything that happens in residential real estate, which is the number one thing they care about is getting connected to a buyer, and everything else is just the cream on top, right? If you don't bring them a buyer, then we all failed at our job. However, there are some other things that matter to them as well, beyond just finding a buyer for their property and for their property rights, which is first, they want to make sure that they're in control of what happens on their land. And so, as I said, no two landowners are kind of going to be exactly the same. You'll have some landowners that say, yeah, I'm willing to do anything on my property, mark yes for everything. And you'll have others that'll say, no, solar, yes, but wind, no, timber, no, cellular tower, yes. And so you'll simply go through a list of questions with every landowner about what's important to them. You have to remember,
Luke, a couple questions on that while we're on that topic. So if I want to be part of that, the use of, I guess maybe you would still call it timber. So if I've got timber that people want to use for carbon offsets, I would click timber and then it would let me know. And then one other question back on your last slide, what is considered special use? Kevin asked that question.
Yeah. So special use, I think it includes cemeteries, golf courses, military bases. Gosh, there was a whole list of things. I can't remember the rest of them, but it was something along those lines.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I think swamps was in that list.
Okay, thanks.
And yes, to your point, I don't have conservation easements on this list, but it is actually a separate question from timber. So are you willing to timber your property, yes or no? If no, then, or I guess if either way, or are you willing to accept offers to put a conservation easement in the property? And you always have to remember that the trade-off that each landowner is making in their mind, right, is that they're unlocking the potential for their property to create value for them. While at the same time, what is the trade-off, right? They're maximizing their land's potential to either provide energy or communications infrastructure or building materials. And so a lot of landowners, this is their land. It's very personal to them. So as they think about each one of these things, it's a very personal decision. They're making this trade-off of what am I getting and what am I giving up in return for that? And how am I helping my community? They're very community-minded people when they have this land and they're integrated in the communities. And look, landowners need you. they need you for the exact same reason they need you in residential real estate. They need you to take care of the details, answer the questions, be their psychologist, be their cheerleader, and walk them through the process and make sure that they understand everything that's happening. So we think, your new motto with your landowners is, we take care of your land so that your land can take care of you. I think it really speaks to that value proposition of what you're trying to do and provide for them, which is, helping them to find every potential opportunity for their land. A couple of the questions that come up inevitably are these four, and I just kind of want to hit on them here. But there's a no risk registration. So if your landowners register their property rights in the system, they are under no compulsion to sell them. They can counteroffer or reject any offer that comes in. So, unlike residential real estate, where if you get a full asking price offer, you kind of expect them to sell, there is no requirement for your landowner to sell. They can simply reject offers as they come in. Now, if they reject 10 offers in a row, we might call you and say, hey, I'm not sure they really want to sell. But there is no requirement for them to sell. So registering is kind of a no-risk registration. And there are no fees to list. So we don't charge you as the agent or the brokerage or the landowner any fees to register property in the system. The only fee that's paid is when there's a successful closing, and that commission gets paid by the landowner. And we take a portion of that commission and you get a portion of that commission. That's how we make money and you make money. And again, we do not charge realtors or brokers any fees. There's no monthly fee. There's no maintenance fee. There's no listing fee of any kind. So we're not adding any additional fixed cost to your model. We only make money if you make money at the process. It is professionally handled, so not only the individual landowner is represented by you, but we also have this network of closing specialists that are available to help with complex questions that we don't expect you to know the answer to every single one of those. And we think there's a real win-win here to unlock the value and maximize the potential of our country's land, all in the way that landowner wants it done. We always want to keep at the core of what we're doing that it is their land and that they're in control of what should or shouldn't happen on it. And so ultimately, we think there's a real win-win-win here by taking what has been a fragmented marketplace that's been somewhat chaotic and paper-driven and people-driven, and by creating the exchange, there's now value propositions for all. So as real estate agents and professionals, have a reason to talk to past and prospective clients that have a significant amount of acreage. It gives you an entirely new income stream to work on. And finally, it's relatively easy compared to what you do in residential real estate. There's no showings, no staging, no marketing. These are professional buyers with cash. There is no bank or mortgage involved, to the earlier question. From the buyer perspective, the actual solar developers and the energy companies, they now have one database for easy searching. They can cut costs associated with people and paper and make deals that were otherwise unknown to them. So when we have that solar deal in New York, that company has two choices. They can send out postcards and put feet on the ground and cold call people, or they can log into RealX and get connected to the real estate professional and landowner in 5 minutes and have a discussion about their interest in leasing for solar. We are the lowest cost and easiest way for those buyers. So those acres and realtors that are registered in RealX are going to get a disproportionate amount of the income in those markets because that solar developer is only doing one project in southwestern New York. And they're going to sign the deal with that acreage that they found in RealX at the lowest cost. All the other neighbors who had land that might have been applicable, but it wasn't registered in RealX, are not going to get offers from that developer. So it really puts you and your landowners at an advantage, almost an unfair advantage over the other land that isn't registered in the system. And finally, the landowner now has a transparent price and process, professional representation, and they know that they're getting registered buyers that will close that have been vetted, no scammers or flippers in the market. So I'm sure more questions will come in, Marilyn, but I want to kind of make sure that everyone's clear on how to start working with RealX. You can go to realx.io, and I want to point out that it's .io, realx.io. There's a section there under the Sell tab for brokers and agents where you can learn a little bit more, and there's a lead form there that you can fill out. But you can either contact me or my colleague, Amy McCarthy. Amy's on the phone today. She's our VP of Broker Services. She's been an agent in the marketplace. She understands your world as well. you can feel free to contact either one of us. So screenshot this page, take a picture with your phone. I'm sure you'll be able to contact us through that, or go back through the Wave group. I'm sure they'll have some information for you there as well to contact us. But this is how you get in contact with us to get started, building a business around property rights.
Yes, we do have lots of questions, and they may spur more questions. I don't know, but there's one from Andrea
All right.
that says, is there a fee to use the closing specialist that RealX offers?
Not today.
Okay.
So we build that into our costs.
Okay.
There are two separate answers there, though. So if you just have questions about who cuts the grass around a solar field, who takes them down at the end of the 20 years, we have people that can answer those questions. If it's actual legal advice, we do not provide legal advice, but we do have a network of natural resource attorneys around the country that you can plug into. And so that cost would be on the landowner in that negotiation. So if you actually have a lawyer reviewing the lease or reviewing the definitive agreement, then that cost is borne by the seller.
Got it. Okay. Next question came in from Georgia. She's asking, how can agents located in urban areas participate? Would the focus be on owners of high-rise rooftops, or as opposed to landowners, or how would it work in urban centers?
Yeah, in urban centers, it's going to be primarily rooftops for solar or cellular. So solar is kind of really making a big push into rooftop solar, and then 5G. So in urban markets, that's going to be your primary target. However, what we've also found, though, is that wealthier people that live in urban environments sometimes have a farm, right, in the northern part of the state, or they own land other places. So we have found that commercial realtors really have a good hook into the commercial folks to get that land. We found that more of the luxury realtors, their clients tend to have ranches and farms other places. And then the rural realtor is kind of the one that has direct access to those landowners more time.
Gotcha. So really, a luxury agent or an urban agent or a rural agent, really everybody has some type of opportunity to take advantage of this new adventure. It's great.
That's right. And because there's no cost, right? No cost to do it. It's just part of your pitch, right? As you're talking with anyone. Hey, do you have land anywhere else that we can help you monetize in any other way? I'll tell you one other thing, Marilyn, that really helps is that if you're in a brokerage that has someone that, if you're not really familiar with land or haven't done a lot of it, if you can partner up with them, it creates a real advantage for you over other people in your market. So we have people that have, either been in the solar industry or been in the oil and gas industry who are now real estate professionals, and they tend to be the most educated. So if you have someone like that, it'll really help you as you kind of launch out into the space.
So as a brokerage, I'm sure there's some brokerages on the call today. Would you recommend that they try to have all of their agents participate in this, or sort of funnel their opportunities like this through that more, if they have an expert like that, to funnel it through that person?
If you have a larger brokerage or a brokerage with someone with this skill set, what we have seen work best is when they make them the point person, right? They already understand how land gets transacted. And then what they do is work with all the other agents in the brokerage to say, hey, agents, if you know people in your sphere that have more than 10 acres, connect them with me. I'll walk them through the process, get them registered, and then they share revenue internally just like they would on any other type of internal referral. So that has really worked well in those brokerages. But for agents who don't have access to that, there's absolutely still registering those property rights with us, and we still have a host of resources that can help them in that process.
I would think that there might be a role in this for the MLS or the association at this point too, to help all of their agents understand that, and their brokers understand that there's a new revenue opportunity, and promoting the idea of being part of RealX as an incremental revenue, especially again in markets right now where things have kind of come to a screeching halt.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had 3 MLSs contact me in the last 2 weeks saying, hey, this seems like something we should be doing for our agents. There's no cost. It's about storing and collecting data, and it's a new way for agents in our market to make money. It's a good way to serve landowners. This just seems like a no-brainer. So we're working with a few of them right now to decide how we best roll that out through education, training, and some level of integration if we can.
That's awesome. Okay, we have another question here from Elisa. How does real estate licensing per state allow for these types of transactions? And are there referrals like we would do in residential?
Yeah, so we did a pretty extensive study of state laws. So in some states, you need a special license in order to transact some of these assets. So sometimes it's considered real property and sometimes it isn't by the definition of the state. But what is 100% true is that if you're a licensed real estate professional, you have the ability to do this work. In some states, if you're not a licensed real estate professional, there's like special licensing you can get. You don't have to become a real estate professional to do it. But like in Ohio, they worked on a law, they rescinded the law. Now I think they're going to pass it again. We'll see. But if you are a licensed real estate professional, you're able to do this. On the referral side, a realtor has to be licensed or have reciprocal licensing in the state where the property is located. So you personally can't list property in Nebraska if you don't have reciprocity or there. You need to refer that to an agent in Nebraska, and that would work just like you would do any referral in residential real estate. So that is one of our requirements, is that you are licensed to do business in the place where you registered the property, because we do think that's a requirement from licensing.
Gotcha. Here's a really interesting question from Rob. He said sellers are going to want to know roughly what to expect for their rights. Is there a way like to do an AVM or a CMA type of thing using residential terms to get someone like just a rough idea of what it might be worth?
Yeah, so I think in most verticals, solar, wind, timber, we can give you a pretty good range. The pricing is pretty definitive. It's pretty easy to tell. The one spot where it's hard to do an estimate is for subsurface rights, because no one really knows what's under there, right?
Got it. Right.
You could drill a well and nothing come up. You could drill a well and it could be a huge one. And so we tell people that we do have a network of folks that can do an appraisal for you for subsurface rights. Like if your seller says, hey, we got this offer, I just have no idea, right? Then we can have a third party do like an appraisal almost. And they look at all kinds of surrounding wells and geology to try to give you some guidance. Now that costs a little extra money, but we didn't want to try to put that on there, because ultimately it's between the buyer and seller what it becomes worth. And especially in oil and gas, it's a little more soft around the edges. In solar, it's almost like if it's 20 acres, you almost know the price without even negotiating. It's just kind of a set rate.
This is kind of more of a, if you're trying to draw analogies, it seems like it's a little bit more like a commercial sale than a residential sale. It's a little bit more, it's not a black and white, everything's the same, everything's upfront and transparent. It's a little bit more of like how commercial business works from what you're describing. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's right. And I think more things are negotiable, right? So your landowners can say, hey, I've got my 100 acres, but you can only do stuff on that 20 acres, right? You can't just put it anywhere you want, right? You can't put the solar field anywhere you want. You can only do it there. And so there's a lot more things that in that final negotiation that landowners do have the ability to negotiate a little bit more, because there's a little bit more different levers where things go and access to the property, etc. Rights of ways are involved sometimes as well if they need access to the property at certain times. So it does feel a little bit more like commercial, because the forms aren't going to be as standardized. We try to standardize it as much as we can, but there are going to be special things with special properties.
So Lara has a question. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, Lara. Can I do this anywhere in Pennsylvania? That was the first question. The second question is, and I think you already answered this, but maybe you can come back to it, is do I need to be local to list it? So maybe using the analogy of, I've got a wealthy client that lives in New York. They've got a farm up in southern Pennsylvania as an example, and I'm licensed in New York. Can I still work with them on that, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the one requirement is that your licensing allows you to do business in that state. So in that example, if you have reciprocity or you're licensed to do business in Pennsylvania, you can absolutely list it. You don't ever have to step foot in Pennsylvania. Typically, you can collect all the information about the property, like parcel IDs and acreage, all that from the tax records. There's no reason for you to ever be on site. But we do want to make sure that you are licensed to do business in the state where the property is. If you're not, then you can refer it to an agent in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, that is a RealX agent, and work on a referral that way. But we do want to make sure that you're registered to do business there. Otherwise, I think we put agents at risk. It's a little bit of a gray area, but we don't want to put agents at risk by doing that if it's not allowed.
But you do have a sort of a referral network, if you will, like you just mentioned that I have a RealX agent. So if I'm in California, I have a property in Florida, and I want to refer it, you have people that you could send us to?
Yeah, you would just need to contact us and we would find them for you. We don't have,
Gotcha.
It's not automated today as an example, but we can help you find an agent in that market. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, Rob has another question. Are there any resources for representation agreements if our local forms don't contemplate these rights?
Yeah. So we actually have a standard form registration agreement. We went and looked at listing agreements across like 12 different states for residential real estate, took pieces and parts of all of them and created what we call a registration statement because we do want landowners as they register their properties for that to be as uniform as it can be across the United States. So we do in our system, as you collect the data, it's automatically creating that registration agreement. And we call it a registration agreement versus a listing agreement because you're really just registering the assets. That's what you're doing. And that gets created in DocuSign and sent to both the landowner and the brokerage agent at the same time at the end of that process. So it is actually a standard form today, although we're finding that we have to make a few tweaks here and there sometimes in different states. But for the most part, it is a standard form.
Got it. Okay. So just I could tell, I think, from at least the people that are asking questions, there's a lot of excitement about this idea.
Yeah.
If an agent wants to, become part of this, how do they get started? What do they have to do, and how complicated is it?
Yeah, so really there's only two steps. So the first is we need to make sure that we have an agreement signed between RealX and the brokerage. That governs the relationship between our two companies, just how it gets registered and what we're agreeing to participate. So if you're an agent on the call today, you will need to get your brokerage to execute the agreement with RealX. It's a standard kind of 6-page agreement, and we can get that out to you. It's actually available on our website, or you can contact Amy or I, and we'll get that to you. If you're a brokerage, same deal. You just have to sign the marketing agreement. Once that's signed, we send you a login, username, and Amy schedules a complete onboarding with you, walks you through everything in the system. We give you almost everything. We have email content that you can put in emails to send out to your sphere. We have social media content that you simply need to post in your social media feeds. We have postcards that we can mail out. If you provide us the addresses, we'll actually do all the work for you.
Awesome.
We'll send them out. We'll mail them. We also have talking points content. So if you're on the phone with someone, we have a list of talking points just to make sure you hit them as you're talking to the individual landowner. And so I think we provided a pretty broad set of tools. And we're actually willing to help customize things as well. So we've just finished up a custom branding kind of mailer for one of our brokerages. So that's what Amy's here for, and she's awesome at it. So
that's great. That's a way above and beyond for something like this, where it's a brand new world. It's awesome. I think you might have just answered this a little bit, but maybe you can revisit it a little bit. Kelly's asking, how do you determine the value for the parcel you're going to lease?
Yeah. So in different verticals, there'll be different values. And so when you're talking with landowners, you'll need to tell them that, hey, the one thing you can guarantee is that all the buyers in the vertical are going to see it. Every offer they're going to get is legitimate. And then when an offer does come in, we'll help provide you whatever data we can to help kind of substantiate the price. As I said, with most verticals, timber, solar, wind, cell towers, where we think the most activity is happening today, we have a pretty good sense. The only one that has a really wider range, again, is the oil and gas. And if your seller is kind of really adamant about wanting to know a valuation, we can connect you with a third-party company that can provide an assessment of that value to evaluate any offers that come in. But I don't think you'd really want to spend that. You wouldn't want to spend that money until there's an actual offer, I think. I think your pitch to landowners up front is, hey, let's just register it. You don't ever have to sell it if you don't want to, right? Unless the landowner wants to spend money up front, then you can help them and we'll get you a valuation for the different assets.
Okay, so tease us a little bit, Luke. Tell us about a really big deal that you just did and how much money the agent or broker made in that deal. Because that's what everybody wants to know. How much money can I make doing this?
Yeah. So I'll give you two examples. One's speed and one's size. So we listed a 27-acre parcel right here in Allegheny County outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I'm standing. And so that's a relatively small parcel. It went out. Every one of our buyers gets notified as soon as you list a new parcel. And so by noon the next day, they had an offer for $4,500 an acre on that 27-acre property. So now they had $130,000-ish offer for that. And that particular brokerage had listed it at, I believe, 8%. And again, you choose what the commission rate is. We've seen the range from 6 to 10, right? And so of that 8%, the brokerage cleared 5%. So that was almost a $6,500 commission for 24 hours of time lag. So that's the fastest deal. That one sets the record for the fastest offer to come in on a parcel.
That's great. Yep.
And then the other one is a solar deal in southwestern New York. The lease is being negotiated right now. Landowner had put the property on about 4 weeks ago. Solar developer came in, and over 20 years, it'll be almost $2 million. So it's approximately, I can't remember the exact numbers, but over 20 years, it's a total of $2 million. And in solar, the payouts can be a little different. So over a 20-year lease, it's a really big deal on that side. And so a couple of percentage points of that. In some solar deals, I'll just be upfront, some solar deals you can get paid up front, and in some solar deals you get paid over time like the landowner does. It depends on the deal we can negotiate with the solar developer. But there's real money to be made. In oil and gas, a 100-acre farm in Appalachia right now is getting offers in the $5,000 per acre range. So that's a $500,000 deal. So now you're talking about a $25,000 commission at 5%.
We like those.
On the
Those
sell
are good.
side. Yeah.
Keep those coming, Luke.
So obviously, the bigger the acreage, the better. In cellular, if you get an offer for an easement, a permanent easement, it's going to be 10 to 15 times the monthly revenue. So those deals can range from $100,000 to $200,000. So, again, you're talking about a $5,000 or $10,000 commission on those deals. So there's real money in this, right, at the individual level. We really try to get realtors to set a goal of getting 1,000 acres registered in the system, because that then gives you a lot of income potential. But we have some realtors who, they're talking to Indian tribes that control big tracts of land. They're talking to bank trust departments that control big parts of land, churches, universities, municipalities, anyone who controls big amounts of land. Lots of times they are not doing a very good job managing that property. It's a real opportunity for agents in their communities to leverage those existing relationships and get big tracts of land. So there are no limitations on who you can go after and who you can get. Look, we're trying to talk to the Catholic Church as well, but if someone else can get them, God bless you. I'm trying to get all of their land registered in the system. So.
That's awesome. Kelly asked a question: is there a certain length of lease that's popular, or is it different depending on the type of land use we're talking about? How does that work?
Yeah, it's different per vertical. So oil and gas is typically a 5-year lease with a 5-year renewal. Solar is going to be more like a 25-year lease with like a 10 to 15-year renewal. So some leases in solar, you're going for 40 years sometimes. In timber, it's usually a one-time stumpage sale. So it's a one-time deal. Leases are not as popular in timber as they once were, where you would lease this, right? And for the next 100 years, you're the only one that gets to cut it. Cell towers are typically 30 years in the lease amount. So most of them are relatively long-term leases, with the exception of timber, which is going to be more like a stumpage sale. Pipelines, you get a one-time payment, based on how many feet they use going across your property. Right-of-ways and easements are a one-time payment in most cases as well for that.
So it's all over. So this is a good question. What can agents tell their clients about RealX so they can trust that this is the best way to unlock the potential of their land? So why RealX versus kind of going it alone? I don't really think there's any other ways to do it there's no other aggregated place to do this right now, is there, for all of these different land use rights?
No, there's very local guys that do this kind of stuff. So you have local auctions for timber sometimes, right? You'll have local oil and gas companies that'll represent your interest just in oil and gas. You'll have solar developers who will send you postcards. You'll have financial buyers who cold call you. And so it's a really fragmented environment today across each of the verticals of how you deal with it. So I think when you're talking with your landowners, you say, look, this is one place to put all your rights. Two, I would say, look, we got an investment from the National Association of Realtors and Second Century Ventures to kind of validate that this is the place that we're doing this. We make sure that all the land from individual landowners is represented by a real estate professional. And we are making sure that we have the broadest set of buyers in the market, right? And so our team is working every day at adding new buyers to the system across every vertical. And in verticals where we don't have a lot of connections, like in timber, we ended up partnering with a company, and they've onboarded all the timber buyers across the country. So
Got
we
it.
make sure that we have all those buyers in the system. But I'll tell you, it's a pretty easy sale. When I say I have acres for them to buy, and there's no cost to come and look, getting the buyers on the system is relatively easy.
I would guess. So here's a really good question from Sarah. Are these transactions closed with the title company, or who manages the payments received? That's a really good question.
Yeah, again, it depends on the type of deal and the
Okay.
vertical. So
Okay.
in solar, it's typically just a lease. There like is no quote unquote closing, and
Got
sometimes
it.
the lease can be like 2 or 3 pages.
Wow.
Now we do end up kind of being the clearinghouse for the money because we have to make sure that the landowner gets their percentage, the realtor and brokerage gets their percentage, and RealX gets their percentage. So it's not escrow as much in that scenario as is just payment processing. We don't hold the money, we just pass it through
Okay.
immediately to the right company. Now, if you're selling your mineral rights, as an example, that is considered real property, and there is a closing. So we have 3 law firms that give us national coverage. They coordinate all the closings. They do escrow on that because on that side of the deal, there is a diligence period. And so they do all of the closing and escrow. So it depends on the deal and the type of deal. So if it's a lease, you typically don't need a closing attorney and escrow. But if it's a mineral rights transaction, you do. So it depends.
Gotcha. Here's one more question from Carla. So it's like commercial. You get paid every time they lease up. So if it keeps on giving as if the lease goes on and there's renewals, you still get a piece of that.
That's right. And so I will make the distinction. In oil and gas and minerals, you only get a percentage of the upfront bonus payment. You don't get a percentage of the well that they drill 5 years from now.
Okay.
In solar, you don't get an upfront payment, but you do participate in the rent stream over the life of the lease. So it depends. So on solar, though, she's absolutely right that every time they renew that and they get paid again and again, that realtor have an ongoing revenue stream that comes from that deal.
Gotcha. And this is a question for me, actually, just hearing all the great questions we're getting from the audience. Is there any place on your website or on any other resources where people can kind of, learn a little bit more about all the nuances of this business to just to educate themselves? So if they're talking to someone, they say, yeah, I'd like to give it solar. How does that work? What does it mean? Just sort of some FAQs almost about how each of these types of land use rights are transacted.
Yeah, so we have, once you've actually registered and have access to the system, we have something called a property rights primer, which gives you a little bit of information about each vertical and how they work and what the different deal types are. We're in the process of creating videos for each one of those, and so that's kind of next on the list, which is, hey, we're gonna give you a little video like of everything I said today about each one of those verticals, right? To give you talking points for each one of them. So we're building out some of that content now. We do not make that publicly available though on our public facing site today. So, but we are working on building out those resources. It's a question we've been getting from our realtors and brokers. Gotcha.
Well, we are a couple minutes over, but there's a couple more questions. So if you're willing to stay, Luke, I think Sophie and Philip would be happy. So from Sophie, are the leases inheritable or part of an estate of the realtor?
Yeah, so it's one of the questions that we've talked about internally. Is we think this creates an asset for the agent and the brokerage, right? If you have thousands of acres registered in the system, then you are the registered agent for those assets. And so, yes, we think it creates a long-term kind of asset, whether you're getting paid out on existing leases that have been signed or acres that remain registered in the system. I think, though, when it comes to brokerages and agents, if an agent leaves the brokerage, it's going to work a lot like the listing agreement, which is the acreage stays with the brokerage. It doesn't transfer with the agent. I think that's really a discussion between the agents and brokerages, but my guess is that's how most of those are going to play out. But it does create an asset for you as you think about retiring, right? You now have a revenue stream that is yours per that. So how does that work? I think we'll figure that out, but I do think it creates an asset for the agent and brokerage that will be valued when you decide to sell your brokerage or decide to leave your real estate business. It's an asset.
So the questions just keep rolling in, Luke. We're going to be here for a while.
Okay,
where do your buyers come from? I think that's an interesting question. How do you get those big companies to say, I'm looking for stuff and come over to your platform?
Yeah, so we have an outside sales team that does nothing all day except call on the buyers in each one of these verticals. I
Got it.
mentioned in oil and gas. In oil and gas is where we have the most buyers. They've kind of been the easiest ones for us to target. In solar, there's really not a lot of them. There's about 100 developers that matter across the country. In timber, as I noted earlier, we ended up signing a partnership with a company because they had relationships with all the buyers and mills across the country. And so they're bring on all the buyers on that side. In cellular, there's like two big companies that matter. One of them's Crown Castle, actually based here in Pittsburgh. And then there's a host of other companies, and really still less than 100 that focus on, buying these towers from existing landowners or more like financial buyers. The one group that we have to work the hardest to find are the financial buyers. And so we met with a group it was 2 weeks ago now. They raised $75 million, and their goal is to go out and buy revenue streams, whether it's from oil and gas or solar revenue streams or wind payments. And so those financial buyers, you have to dig a little harder to find them. But they love what we're doing because today they literally cold call people and send out postcards. So the pitch to the buyers is really straightforward. Hey, we have acres, we have revenue streams that have been registered by institutions, companies, and individual landowners through their real estate professionals. And I think one of the most powerful parts of the system, Marilyn, is we allow our buyers to give us target areas. And so when you sign up, we're going to tell you what buyers we have and what they're looking for in your county or in your state. So I have a list of 42 counties right now that are the highest target for oil and gas, as an example. And then around Pittsburgh here, I have 8 counties where I know solar developers are looking. So when they log in and tell me what they want, I'm able to pass those target markets back to our agent and broker audience and say, hey, you should be focused on solar in these 8 counties. This is where you're going to get the most action over the next 6 months.
Okay, this is not a question, but I think you'd appreciate this. This comes from Lara. She said, "This is incredible. Thank you so much."
I was thinking
you might
earlier
like to
today.
hear that.
I've been in real estate technology for 18 years. This is 18 years in real estate technology, and I've gone to hundreds, if not thousands, of real estate conferences. It's kind of hard to estimate, and very rarely do you hear something new, right? So when I left the industry to go look at a lot of other companies to start, when I found this opportunity, it just kind of really stuck with me that this is something entirely new that I'd never heard before. And it was a completely new opportunity for real estate agents and brokers, which is kind of why we did it, right? I think this is truly unique. It's a new market opportunity. And I've yet to meet someone that said, hey, you know what? I already thought of this. It hasn't happened yet. So,
it's such a no-brainer once you've heard it, but you're like, wow, what a great idea. Here's another one from Sharon. Sharon, I think, has already signed up. I think she's already selling property on the platform. She's very excited. If my seller has a lease but sells the property, can the rights of the lease transfer to the new owner? Can it go with the property?
It can, or the landowner can keep it. So lots of times when you're selling, you can sell the property, the land, and you can sever the subsurface rights. And if it has a producing well on it, there's just a right of way. So the new buyer has to give a right of way or an easement for that part of the property where it's at. So that seller could actually keep that revenue stream in that deal. And I'll tell you one of my motivating stories as well, which is my family sold our family farm in 2008. And we sold the farm for approximately $500,000. And we let the mineral rights go with it because we didn't know what they were worth. I was not in this space. I had no idea. Our realtor had no idea what the mineral rights were worth or what we should be valuing them at, or should we sever them. There was not much discussion. 2 years after we sold the farm, the new buyer got an offer at $5,000 an acre. So they got $500,000 to lease the mineral rights.
Wow.
So they basically got the farm for free, right?
Wow.
And so that was always the story stuck with me for the last decade, which is, gosh, we just didn't know any better, right? I mean, and neither did our realtor, no fault of their own. They didn't know any better either. And so, we really missed out. And so if RealX had existed, we would have severed those property rights, listed them in RealX, and sold the surface rights to the horse farmer for the $500,000 that we got anyway. So that's all he was really buying. And so I think those are the types of stories, that motivate me.
Absolutely. Well, I think you've hit a nerve here, at least with the several people that have asked questions and hopefully many others. But If you have any more questions, I'm sure just email Luke at realx.io, or go to the website, as he said, or go to Amy at realx.io. If you have any other questions, you can contact us at Marilyn, Marilyn, at RA Technology, and I'm happy to pass you over to them. We are going to be doing oh, wait, I have more questions. Here's another one, sorry. Is there any training? Also, will we receive a copy of the presentation? Yes, I was just going to say that, Georgia. We'll be sending all of you a recording of this. So feel free to share it with, if you're the agents in the business, send it to the brokerage. If you know someone in your company that already does this type of work, please send them. I can tell you, I've had many conversations with agents that have been in this world. And one guy actually said to me, I thought you were kidding me, because this is so much what I need for my business. I thought you were making it up. This was not on April 1st. This was another day. He's like, this is the answer to all of life's problems. So there may be someone, even if it's not exactly what you need to do, but take advantage of it. It's a whole new way of doing business, a whole new way to find, looks like passive income in even some cases, which is awesome. So thanks everybody for attending. And Luke, thank you so much for having the foresight to bring this to the market. I think it's gonna be a big hit.
Great. Thank you, Marilyn, and stay healthy, everyone.
You too. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.